Hello and welcome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike, and this channel, Ramble and Ruminate, is where I essentially discuss all things sort of philosophy related. And this series of videos, Philosophy 101, is something I am putting together to provide an introduction to philosophy, an introduction that goes beyond just the ideas and actually provides you with the tools you need to engage in the act of philosophy. So at the moment, we are working through our political philosophy module, and in the last video, we explored the different theories of justice and how they apply to societal challenges. So today, we're going to turn to liberty, another fundamental concept in political philosophy. What does it mean to be free? Does liberty simply mean the absence of interference, or does it also require the capacity to achieve your goals? Throughout history, these questions have shaped debates about rights, governance, and personal freedom. So, by understanding these ideas, we can better appreciate the role that liberty takes in shaping societies and also individual lives. So, the agenda for this video is pretty simple. We're going to start by defining exactly what negative and positive liberty are, and then we're going to think about some of the key thinkers in this particular area. And after that, we are going to take a look at the concept of liberty as it presents itself in contemporary debates. And from there, we're going to think about how we balance liberty with other values, because that's important too. And then finally, we're going to think about some of these practical implications of liberty. So let's start with negative liberty, or as it's sometimes called, freedom from. So negative liberty, as defined by thinkers like Isaiah Berlin, refers to freedom from external interference. So essentially, it's about having the space to act without being constrained by others, whether the others in question are individuals, institutions, or the state. And this form of liberty is foundational in liberal democracies, as it ensures that individuals can make personal decisions free from any undue coercion or constraint. For example, negative liberty is deeply tied to fundamental rights such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to privacy. And these rights act as barriers against external pressures that might seek to limit autonomy or individual autonomy. Negative liberty also often emphasizes the importance of limiting government overreach, ensuring that the state power doesn't infringe on the freedoms and rights of its citizens. And this perspective has historically shaped legal systems and policies, especially here in the West, to protect personal liberties such as constitutional safeguards and judicial oversight. In practice, negative liberty raises questions about the extent of permissible interference. Should individuals be free to act as they wish, even if their actions, like indirectly affect other people? So by understanding the the nuances of negative liberty, we can hopefully critically analyze its role in maintaining a just and equitable society. So that is negative liberty in a nutshell, as it were. And I have further distilled that into a couple of points. Those are the sort of the main points. So the emphasis on non-interference and the association with individual rights. But there's also a couple of the examples of negative liberty that I mentioned a minute ago that are on there too. So you might want to write that down. That's, it's important information. But let's now take that information and do something with it. Let's use it, because information without implementation is basically useless. And it's also it makes it all really quite forgettable. So we're going to attempt to answer a question, and the thought processes required in order to answer this question are going to help you sort of solidify your understanding of negative liberty. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the right to privacy. How does this particular right illustrate negative liberty? And what happens when external interference, such as government surveillance, compromises this right? So there is a couple of questions all squished together there. So we're gonna sort of, when we think about that, we're gonna split that apart a bit. But before I give you some things to think about, I want you to have a go at answering this question first. So pause the video, jump in the comments and answer. But if you are stuck, then do hold on a moment, because I'm going to throw out some threads, as it were, for you to potentially grab hold of, or at least hopefully stimulate some thoughts. So how would we respond to this question? Well, you could say something like that. So to tackle that first part of the question about the right to privacy, you might say something like, the right to privacy ensures that individuals can make personal choices without fear of intrusion, such as deciding how to communicate or what to search online. And or you might also think about how privacy protects freedom of expression by allowing people to explore ideas without public scrutiny. So bear those two ideas in mind, and let's think about the second part of that question. So what happens when external interference, like government surveillance, compromises this right? So my first suggestion about personal choice without fear of intrusion, government surveillance would compromise this by monitoring actions, even if the individual hasn't actually done anything wrong. And a second suggestion I put forward about privacy protects freedom of expression by allowing people to explore ideas without public scrutiny. Essentially, the surveillance issue really risks limiting free speech, therefore making it no longer free. So that's a really basic response. I'm just throwing those out there to give you something to think about, and hopefully you'll come back to me with a much better response than that. Hopefully. So that's negative liberty, or freedom from. So now we can move on and start thinking about positive liberty, which is something we often call freedom to. So positive liberty it's about having the capacity to act and achieve one's goals. So unlike negative liberty, which emphasizes freedom from interference, positive liberty focuses on self-realization, empowerment, and actualizing your potential. And this form of liberty recognizes that being free from external constraints is insufficient if individuals lack the resources, opportunities, or skills to exercise their freedom effectively. For example, access to education and healthcare are often cited as sort of essential enablers of positive liberty. Education provides the knowledge and skills to make informed decisions and pursue your aspirations. At the same time, healthcare ensures individuals have the physical and mental well-being to act on their goals. Positive liberty frequently requires active intervention by the state or society, such as policies to reduce poverty, provide public services, or address systemic inequalities. And these measures aim to create an environment where all individuals can participate fully in society and also achieve their potential regardless of their background or circumstances. However, this approach raises important questions about balancing collective responsibility with individual autonomy. How far should governments redistribute resources or mandate social programs to promote positive liberty? At its core, positive liberty um, challenges us to consider whether we are free to act or and whether we have the real ability and also opportunity to doing so to do so. So by addressing barriers such as systemic inequality, social exclusion, or lack of access to resources, positive liberty seeks to ensure that freedom is meaningful and substantive for all members of society. So as always, I have distilled that down into a couple of, important points on the slide next to me. So the positive liberty puts an emphasis on self-mastery and agency, and also requires access to resources and opportunities. And the examples I cited a moment ago are education and healthcare and economic equality as enablers of freedom. So that's positive liberty in a very brief kind of nutshell, as it were. So let's think now about using that information by answering a question. So how does access to education illustrate positive liberty? And what barriers to positive liberty might still exist even in societies that prioritize equality? So, as always, I'd like to pause the video and attempt to answer this question. But if you are stuck, then hold on a moment, because I'm going to, as I always do, I'm going to throw some threads out there. So, how would we answer this question? Well, first of all, we need to recognize that there's actually two questions there. So we're going to tackle each of those independently. So we might, so that first question, how does access to education illustrate positive liberty? How would we answer that question? Well, we might say something like, access to education empowers individuals to make informed choices and pursue careers which aligns with positive liberty's emphasis on self-realization. Wonderful. But there was a second question. And that question was, what barriers to positive liberty might still exist even in societies that prioritize equality? And in response to that question, we might say something like, barriers such as poverty or systemic discrimination can prevent certain groups from accessing quality education, which obviously limits their ability to achieve goals. So that's just some thoughts. I want you to provide your own. But as I say, if you are really stuck, that's something that you can use as a sort of a leaping off point, as it were. So that's negative and positive liberty, and we've looked at them independently, but a lot of the time they're not independent of one another. They kind of both have to exist at the same time, and as a result there's a tension between the two because they are quite different. So let's think now about those tensions. So negative and positive liberty can sometimes conflict in some really quite significant and nuanced ways, particularly when societal policies aim to address collective needs while respecting individual rights. For instance, increasing taxes to fund public healthcare is a clear example of this tension. On the one hand, such taxes enhance positive liberty by ensuring that all individuals have access to essential healthcare services, thus empowering them to live healthier and sort of more fulfilling lives. And this access addresses inequalities and provides the the resources necessary for individuals to realize their potential fully. On the other hand, these taxes can limit negative liberty by imposing constraints on individuals' wealth and freedom to allocate their resources as they choose. So critics of such policies might argue that mandatory taxation represents an overreach of governmental power, infringing on personal autonomy and financial independence. Supporters, however, may counter that the collective benefit of a healthier population far outweighs the individual sacrifices, emphasizing that societal freedom cannot thrive without a basic level of communal well-being. And this tension highlights broader debates about the role of government in promoting freedom. Should the state prioritize creating opportunities for all, i.e., positive liberty, even at the expense of individual non-interference, i.e., negative liberty? Ultimately, the balance between these two concepts often reflects deeper societal values and priorities, such as the emphasis on individualism versus collective responsibility, ensuring that exploring these conflicts encourages us to consider how policies can be designed to harmonize these liberties, fostering a society that values both autonomy and equitable opportunity. So I have attempted to distill that down into a couple of points on the slide. So make note of those before we move on to the question. So as you can see, we've got negative liberty prioritizes non-interference. Positive liberty emphasizes empowerment and access to resources. Policies often require balancing both forms of liberty, and an example that I've listed here that I gave only a moment ago is the tension between healthcare funding and taxation. So that's the tensions between positive and negative liberty. So let's think about solidifying that newfound knowledge, as it were, with a question. So write down an example of a policy that balances positive and negative liberty, or one where the two are in conflict. And then write a paragraph or two about how this policy reflects the broader societal priorities. So obviously, pause the video and attempt to answer that. So let's think about how we would answer that. So we're going to, as I did it with the other questions already, we're going to split those sort of two questions apart. So the first part about an example of policy. So a balanced example might be free public education, which supports positive liberty by ensuring access to learning, but respects negative liberty by not mandating private contributions. And now we can think about the conflict. So a conflict example could be mandatory vaccination policies. That would be a good one, right? So they enhance collective positive liberty, i.e., in this case, health, but they do so by limiting negative liberty, i.e., in this case, personal choice. So that's some, some threads for you to grab hold of. And what I haven't done is given a response to how this, the part about, discussing how this policy reflects broader societal priorities, because I want you to do that completely independent. There is no right and wrong answer to these questions, by the way. The important thing is the thought that goes into it. So yeah, that's negative and positive liberty and the sort of tensions that exist between them. So now let's think about some of the thinkers behind these ideas. So we're going to start with John Stuart Mill and his concept of liberty and harm. And John Stuart Mill wrote an incredible work called On Liberty. And this particular work is a cornerstone of liberal political thought and is widely regarded as one of the most profound examinations of the limits and justification of individual freedom. And Mill argued that individuals should be free to act as they wish, provided their actions do not cause harm to others. And this is known as the harm principle, which is a foundational idea in modern discussions of liberty. According to Mill, the only legitimate reason for society or the state to interfere with an individual's actions is to prevent harm to others. So, offence and personal dislike and so on are insufficient justification. Mill's emphasis on the harm principle reflects a deep commitment to individual autonomy, recognizing that personal freedom is essential for eudaimonia, for human flourishing. Mill's work also underscores the importance of free speech as a cornerstone of liberty. He really quite famously argued that the free exchange of ideas, even controversial or unpopular ones, is essential for societal progress and the pursuit of truth. Mill believed that diversity of thought fosters intellectual growth and innovation, as challenging ideas prevents stagnation and complacency. He also warned that suppressing dissenting opinions, even those deemed wrong or harmful, risks silencing truths that could benefit society. And by protecting free speech, Mill's philosophy seeks to create an environment where individuals can explore, debate, and refine their understanding of the world. And his arguments continue to shape contemporary debates on the boundaries of freedom, particularly in balancing the right to self-expression with the responsibility to avoid harm. Mill's nuanced exploration of liberty challenges us to carefully evaluate when restrictions are justified, emphasizing the need to safeguard individual freedoms while maintaining a just and equitable society. So the harm principle is sort of that side is distilled down into a couple of what I thought were the most important points. So freedom of thought and expression are essential, and society can restrict actions only to prevent harm to others. So, do you agree with Mill that speech should be restricted only when it causes harm? Can harm be subjective, and how should this affect policy decisions? So as always, pause the video, jump in the comments, and let me know. Respond, give me your thoughts. And if you are struggling, let's think about some of the sort of potential responses. So you might think you might answer with yes, that you do agree, because unrestricted speech can lead to harm, such as inciting violence. However, defining harm requires careful analysis to avoid subjective overreach? And that question, obviously, really, there's two questions. So, can harm be subjective, and how should this affect policy decisions? Well, harm is subjective. What one finds offensive might not actually, you know, bother anyone else. So this subjectivity really does complicate policy making. So that's some thoughts, right? I'd like you to build upon that. If you take those as inspiration, because thinking about this is, well, it's extremely relevant because it's woven into the fabric of the societies that we live in right now. This is not thinking about ancient civilizations and all of that. This is life right now, the world you live in right now. So thinking about these things could not be more important. So that is John Stuart Mill. So let's move on now to another great thinker in this particular area. And that is Jean-Jacques Rousseau and his concept of freedom through the general will. So Rousseau argued that true freedom comes from participating in a society that is governed by the general will. And when he says the general will, what he's referring to is the community's collective interest. So for Rousseau, liberty is not merely about individual autonomy or freedom from interference, but is fundamentally tied to aligning personal interests with the collective good. He believed that when individuals contribute to and abide by the general will, they achieve a higher freedom that transcends personal desires and selfishness. And this concept challenges the idea that freedom is solely about doing as one pleases. Instead, it suggests that true true liberty involves like cooperation and the pursuit of shared values that benefit all members of society. So Rousseau's idea sounds pretty good, right? But it's not without its controversy. So critics have argued that the emphasis on the general will risks suppressing individual dissent and diversity in the name of unity. They point out that the decisions made under the guise of the general will can sometimes reflect the interests of the majority or dominant group, marginalizing minority perspectives. Also, enforcing the general will might require coercion to ensure conformity, essentially, which in turn raises some really quite legitimate concerns about authoritarianism. But despite these critiques, Rousseau's vision offers a profound insight into the relationship between individual freedoms and collective responsibility, urging us to reflect on how personal liberties coexist with societal well-being. In modern contexts, his ideas resonate in discussions about environmental policies, public health initiatives, and other areas where individual sacrifices are made for the greater good. So Rousseau's liberty can be distilled down really into 2 points: freedom as participation and aligning personal interests with the collective will. So let's try and think about this. So how does Rousseau's idea of liberty differ from Mill's idea? And which of them do you find more compelling and why? Are there modern examples where Rousseau's ideas might apply? So let's think about this. So obviously, before I give you my thoughts, my brief thoughts on it, I want you to pause the video and have a go at answering this yourself. But yeah, so my thoughts, sort of briefly anyway, on this. So you could say something like Rousseau focuses on collective freedom, while Mill prioritizes individual autonomy. And you might say that, I mean, this is, my response. This is my opinion, but I really want yours. So I find Mill's view more compelling because it prevents potential tyranny of the majority. Um, so the second part of that question is: are there modern examples where Rousseau's ideas might apply? And for this, I would say that Rousseau's ideas really could apply to environmental policies where individual sacrifices align with the collective sustainability goals. So that's Mill and Rousseau, right? Two really prominent thinkers in the field, but we're also going to move on and we're going to think about um, an idea put forward by Isaiah Berlin. So let me just change the slide. So Berlin wrote an essay called Two Concepts of Liberty. And in that essay, he Berlin distinguished between negative and positive liberty, offering a framework, if you will, to understand the different dimensions of freedom and their implications. Negative liberty refers to freedom from external interference, emphasizing the protection of individual autonomy against coercion or constraints imposed by others, including the state. On the other hand, positive liberty is about the freedom to act in ways that fulfill one's potential, often requiring external support or intervention to overcome personal or systemic limitations. Berlin's critical insight into positive liberty lies in its potential to justify authoritarianism. He warned that when the state or an authority presumes to know what individuals should want for their own good, it risks essentially imposing its own vision of freedom. For example, a government might enforce policies in the name of empowerment or sort of collective progress that limits personal choices, effectively coercing individuals to conform to an idealized notion of self realization. Berlin's cautionary perspective emphasizes that positive liberty, while aiming to enhance individual capabilities, can easily be co opted to justify coercion and control, eroding the very freedoms it seeks to promote. And this insight underscores the importance of safeguarding individual autonomy and diversity of thought, even when we are sort of pursuing collective goals. Berlin's distinction challenges us to critically examine the balance between enabling conditions for freedom and protecting the right to self-determination. It also invites ongoing debate about how to design policies that empower individuals without overstepping the boundaries that preserve their liberty. So, as you can see on the slide next to me, that really can be roughly distilled down into a couple of points. So, point one being that negative liberty can justify coercion. No, positive liberty, can justify coercion, is what I meant to say. And that negative liberty safeguards individual autonomy. So, at this point, I've got another question for you. I'm sure you're sick of them by now, but nonetheless, I've got another one and I've got loads more. So, what I want you to do is write an example of how positive liberty could lead to overreach. How could this be avoided in a democratic society? And I also want you to write a paragraph or two about some of the sort of potential safeguards against authoritarianism. So, As always, pause the video, jump in the comments, respond, give me your thoughts, your ideas on this, and engage with other people as well in the comments over their ideas. But how might we answer this question? Well, I guess you could say something like government mandated savings savings plans enhance future freedom, but reduce current choice, risking overreach. Democratic oversight and transparency could potentially mitigate this risk. Or you might say something like overreach occurs when the state imposes lifestyles like banning unhealthy foods. Safeguards include public consultation and upholding negative liberty. So I want you to think about that and have a stab at answering that in the comments. Absolutely no pressure if you don't want to or are unable to. But it would be good for you to at least attempt to answer these questions. But yeah, so the thought that goes into it is the important thing. That's the bit that does all the magic, that does all the work. So that's why I have these questions for you all the time. If we was in a face-to-face scenario, like a classroom or whatever, I could just put the question to the room, and you could all have a go at answering it, and so on, and we could discuss it. But because we are not in a classroom, we're on YouTube, we have to do it this way. So, now that we have examined some of the key thinkers in in liberty, I want to move on and think about liberty in the context of contemporary debate. So we're going to start with freedom of speech. So freedom of speech is a classic example of negative liberty. It emphasizes the absence of interference from an individual's ability to express their thoughts and ideas without censorship or restraint. And this principle is foundational in liberal democracies, serving as a safeguard for individual autonomy and the free exchange of ideas. However, the principle is not without its complexities and challenges. So debates surrounding hate speech, misinformation, and the role of digital platforms highlight the need to carefully balance the right to free expression with the potential harm that unregulated speech can cause. For instance, hate speech can marginalize communities and incite violence, raising questions about whether such expressions should remain unfettered. Similarly, misinformation, particularly in the sort of digital age where I nearly said a bad word then. Where nonsense false information and nonsense really. I was trying to think of a politer way of putting that, but yeah. That's as good as I can do. But yeah, so essentially this issue with misinformation is particularly prevalent right now in the digital age because false information and nonsense can spread so fast. And this, as a result, poses significant risk to public health, democracy, and societal trust. Social media platforms such are kind of serve as sort of modern conduits for speech, and as a result, these platforms amplify these challenges by providing what is essentially a global stage where speech is instant, far-reaching, and difficult to regulate effectively. And this forces us to reconsider the traditional boundaries of free speech, asking whether it is sufficient to prevent harm. Ultimately, the discussion reflects like a deeper tension between the preserving the openness of dialogue and protecting rather individuals and societies from harm. requiring like nuanced approaches to address the evolving landscape of communication in the digital era. So let's now think about a question. So that question is, should freedom of speech include the right to spread harmful misinformation? Why or why not? And how should platforms like social media regulate speech? So as always, pause the video, jump in the comments and respond. So let's think about how we might reply to this question. So essentially there's a couple of questions in there, and so one of those questions is, as you can see, is about the should freedom of speech also include the right to spread nonsense? So that that's either a yes or no. That's binary, right? So no, misinformation can cause terrible harm, like during public health crises, or yes, even misinformation is free speech. And sort of regulation risks giving too much power to platforms or governments. So that's some some potential ideas in there. So freedom of speech it's a difficult one um, to manage. There doesn't seem to me to be a one size fits all kind of approach to it that works. So it's potentially a never ending sort of discussion and debate, but it is an important one, especially here in the West, where we value free speech as a basic right. So let's think now about economic liberty. So economic liberty is a foundational concept in discussions about individual autonomy and societal development, and is often associated with the freedom to manage your own resources and make financial decisions without excessive interference from external entities such as the government. Traditionally, economic liberty is rooted in negative freedom, emphasizing the right to be free from excessive regulation, taxation, or restrictions on property ownership and market participation. For example, supporters of this perspective argue that reducing taxes and deregulating industries fosters innovation, entrepreneurship, and economic growth by allowing individuals to exercise greater control over their economic activities. However, proponents of positive liberty contend that true economic freedom extends beyond the absence of interference. They argue that meaningful economic liberty requires ensuring individuals have the resources and opportunities necessary to achieve their potential. And this includes access to quality education, affordable healthcare, and economic stability. Elements that empower individuals to participate fully in society and also pursue their goals. For instance, without access let me try that again. Without access to education, individuals may lack the skills required to secure well-paying jobs, thereby limiting their ability to exercise their economic freedom. Similarly, inadequate healthcare can hinder a person's capacity to work or make long-term plans, further constraining economic autonomy. And the tension between these two perspectives raises some really important questions about the role of government in economic life. Should the state prioritize minimal interference to protect individual choice, or should it actively intervene to create conditions that enable all citizens to thrive? Resolving this tension requires a nuanced understanding of economic policy, of how, economic policies impact both individual liberty and the sort of collective well-being. For example, universal healthcare or subsidized education programs could be seen as enhancing positive liberty by leveling the playing field, even if they require higher taxes that might infringe on the negative liberty. Ultimately, economic liberty is not merely about what individuals can avoid, but also about what they can achieve, making it a vital area of debate in shaping equitable and good and prosperous societies. So now that we have had a quick rundown of economic liberty, let's think about the question that I have to the side of me. So what I want you to do is think about an economic policy that you support. And does this policy emphasize negative or positive liberty, and why? And I also want you to, further to that, to consider the implications for both individual and collective welfare. So pause the video, jump in the comments, and come up with your responses to that. So when we try and answer this question, there's some things worth thinking about, I think. So you might consider that universal healthcare emphasizes positive liberty by ensuring that everyone has access to let me try that again. So universal healthcare can potentially emphasize positive liberty by ensuring everyone has access, and this in turn promotes equal opportunity. Or you might think something like lowering taxes emphasizes negative liberty, allowing individuals to keep more of their income and make personal choices. So again, there's no right or wrong answer to these questions. The important thing is you get your thinking caps on, because as philosophers, that's what we are. We are thinkers. We think about thinking and all the things that come with it. So, now that we have thought about the economic issues, let's think about technology and privacy and how this affects liberty. So, the rise of technology has sparked complex and ongoing debates about the nature of liberty in the digital age, particularly concerning privacy, security, and autonomy. Should governments and corporations have the power to collect and utilize personal data? On the other hand, on the one hand, proponents argue that data collection can be justified to enhance security, improve services, and address societal issues such as crime prevention or public health management. On the other hand, critics highlight that these practices often infringe on negative liberty by violating individuals' freedom from interference. As private information is collected and gathered, monitored, and potentially used or misused without permission or consent. Also, technological surveillance raises significant concerns about transparency and accountability. In many cases, individuals are unaware of the extent to which their data is being collected or how it is being used, which in turn undermines their ability to make informed decisions about their privacy. And this lack of agency contradicts the very principles of liberty by creating an imbalance of power between individuals and those who control the data. At the same time, individuals bear some responsibility for the safeguarding of their own data. With a greater awareness of cybersecurity practices and the use of privacy-enhancing tools such as encryption, people can take proactive steps to protect themselves. However, relying solely on personal responsibility overlooks systemic challenges such as the dominance of large technology companies and insufficient regulatory frameworks. Governments, therefore, have a critical role in enacting laws that uphold security and privacy, ensuring that technological advancements do not come at the expense of fundamental freedoms. And this debate ultimately forces us to consider balancing individual privacy with collective safety in a world where data has become invaluable. Should privacy always take precedence, or are there contexts where its compromise is justified for the greater good? Historical examples, such as the use of mass surveillance or to combat terrorism or manage public health crises, whatever the word is, illustrates that while such measures can yield benefits, they must be carefully regulated to prevent abuse and maintain trust. Without safeguards, the encroachment of technology on privacy risks creating an environment of perpetual surveillance, eroding the foundational principles of liberty. So, that is the very beginning of technology and its effects, as it were, technology and privacy. There is so much more that could be said on that particular one, but we've already been here nearly an hour and we're not finished yet. So I don't want to keep you all day. So I am going to finish that there. So we'll jump straight to the question. How should we balance individual privacy with public safety in a digital world? Are there examples where privacy has been compromised for security reasons, and were these compromises justified? So this is a big question, giant question, and a really difficult one to answer. But I do want you to have a go nonetheless, so jump in the comments and give me your response. But let's think about how we could potentially answer this question. So you might say something like, privacy and safety must be balanced, as seen in counter-terrorism measures. Surveillance must be proportional and transparent. Or you might say something like, compromising privacy rarely feels justified because it creates a slippery slope towards authoritarianism. So those are just some threads I'm throwing out there. If you do end up latching hold of those, only use it as the starting point for your answer, not the totality of it. So let's now that we've answered that question, let's now move on and think about how we balance liberty with other values. So we're going to start by thinking about liberty versus equality, and then we're going to go liberty versus security, and then we'll move on. But so let's start with liberty versus equality. So liberty and equality can sometimes be at odds, which presents a profound philosophical and practical challenge. Liberty, particularly in its negative form, emphasizes the absence of interference, ensuring individuals can act freely without constraints. Conversely, equality seeks to level the playing field, often requiring intervention to redistribute resources, opportunities, or power to achieve fairness. For example, policies promoting economic equality, such as progressive taxation or universal basic income, may necessitate limiting certain individual freedoms, particularly regarding wealth accumulation or unfettered market activities. And the prioritization of these values often depends on the context and societal goals. Should a society prioritize liberty at the expense of growing inequality, which could hinder the overall well-being of its citizens? Or should equality take precedence, even if it requires curbing some personal freedoms? Advocates for liberty might argue that excessive regulation or redistribution stifles innovation and individual initiative. At the same time, proponents of equality contend that unrestrained freedom can exacerbate disparities, essentially undermining social cohesion and justice. Reconciliation of these values is possible, but it does require nuanced policy making. For instance, implementing policies like free public education or subsidized healthcare enhance equality while preserving the liberty of individuals to make personal choices. Such measures address systemic barriers without overly infringing on individual autonomy. Exploring the interplay between liberty and equality encourages deeper reflection on societal priorities and the principles underpinning a just and indeed balanced society. So, do you think it's fair to restrict individual wealth for the sake of greater societal equality? Why or why not? And are there policies that successfully balance liberty and equality? So pause the video, jump in the comments with your response. As always, there is no right or wrong answer to these questions. The important thing is you think. So how would we answer this question? Well, the first part of that question is it fair to restrict individual wealth for the sake of greater societal equality? And that is binary. It's yes or no. And then, there's the why or why not. And then a final question, are there policies that successfully balance liberty and equality? So let's try and think about that. So you might say yes, it is fair to restrict individual wealth, and that restricting wealth through progressive taxation funds social programs that in turn promote collective well-being. Or you could say no, wealth redistribution disincentivizes innovation and hard work, therefore undermining liberty. As I say, there's no right answer to this question. It's an opinion piece, right? So have a good think about this, because your response to this question will tell you a lot about yourself and your own personal values. It will tell you some things about your own personal values that you perhaps wouldn't have been able to, articulate before. So all of these questions are wonderful in that regard. So, but yeah, so let's now, so that was liberty versus equality. And then the other big one, obviously, is liberty versus security. So let's move on. In times of crisis, governments often face the challenging task, and that's an understatement, the challenging part. They often face the challenging task of balancing liberty and security, as the need to protect public safety may require restricting individual freedoms. An example of this that we've all recently lived through and experienced is the recent pandemic. So during that time we had lockdowns and curfews and travel restrictions, and so on and so forth. And these measures definitely 100%, irrefutably limited individual freedom, such as the ability to move freely or assemble in groups. So this was deemed at the time necessary in order to curb the spread of the virus and prevent healthcare systems from being overwhelmed. So, deciding when such trade-offs are justified requires some really careful consideration of several principles. First, the principle of proportionality ensures that restrictions are neither excessive nor arbitrary, aligning the severity of measures with the magnitude of the threat. For example, a nationwide lockdown might be justified during a severe outbreak, but not during periods of low transmission. Second, transparency is critical. Governments must openly communicate the reasons for the restrictions, the evidence supporting them, and the criteria for lifting them to maintain public trust. Third, temporal. I can never say that word, but basically it's essential that it's temporary. um, so, restrictions on liberty should always be temporary and subject to regular review to ensure that they don't become permanent fixtures that erode fundamental freedoms. And finally, accountability mechanisms must be in place to allow citizens to question and challenge government actions, safeguarding against potential overreach. Historical examples, such as the expansion of surveillance after 9/11, demonstrate how crises can lead to enduring limitations on liberty if not carefully managed. By adhering to these guiding principles, societies can attempt to navigate the delicate balance between liberty and security, ensuring that measures taken during crises protect both the immediate safety of the citizens and the long-term integrity of democratic freedoms. So that was all rather a mouthful, if I'm honest. But let's try and solidify that one with a question, which you can see next to me. So what I want you to do is think about an example of a situation where where security outweighed liberty, and do you think it was justified? And I also want you to reflect on the long-term implications of this trade-off. So, pause the video and attempt to answer this question. I'm going to throw some threads out there that I've already sort of shared with you in like a moment ago. So if you are stuck trying to answer this question, it will give you a good sort of starting point. So, you could say something like lockdowns were justified during the pandemic to save lives, but they must be sort of temporary and well justified in order to avoid overreach. Or you could say something like security measures at airports, like airport screenings after 9/11, were justified, but they did, as a result, create a precedent for intrusive policies. So yeah, that's just some thoughts for you to grab hold of if you're a bit stuck on that question. So we have gone through we've gone through a lot basically over the last how long has it been? About an hour. Blimey, I've kept you for ages. Sorry. So we've gone through a lot. So let's try and wrap this all up now. One more question and then we'll go, right? So yeah, let's wrap it up. So understanding liberty it's not just a theoretical exercise, as hopefully I've been able to illustrate by throughout this video. It's not just a theoretical exercise. It's one that has far-reaching practical implications that deeply influence policy making, governance, and the fabric of everyday life. How we conceptualize liberty determines how societies balance individual freedoms with collective responsibilities, shaping everything from economic structures to social norms. For instance, in education reform, liberty manifests in debates over school choice, standardized curricula, and access to quality education, reflecting the tension between fostering individual autonomy and ensuring equitable opportunities for all. Similarly, in technology regulation, liberty becomes a critical lens through which issues of privacy, data ownership, and digital rights are examined. Should individuals have absolute control over their online presence, or should governments step in to regulate for the sake of collective security? And these questions underscore the practical importance of liberty as a guiding principle. Further, liberty influences how societies address systemic issues such as healthcare, access, economic inequality, and climate policies, determining whether interventions prioritize freedom from interference or freedom to achieve one's potential. And by recognizing the profound practical impacts of liberty, we can better navigate its complexities, ensuring that its application promotes both individual well-being and societal progress. So before we part ways, I have one more question for you that's been sitting here next to me, staring at you for this last couple of minutes. So what I want you to do is write a paragraph or two to answer this question. So do you think positive or negative liberty is more important in creating a fair society? So do you favor positive liberty or negative liberty, and why? And how would your answer apply to a specific policy or a real world issue? So before I go, I'm going to throw a couple of threads out there just to help get the old grey matter going, so to speak. But I do want you to answer this for yourself and in hopefully more detail than I'm about to convey. So how might we respond to this question? Well, you might say that positive liberty is more important because it ensures everyone has equal opportunities to succeed, like through universal education. Or you could say that negative liberty is crucial to protect individual autonomy and prevent government overreach, such as free speech protections. So there's just some thoughts thrown out there to hopefully help you answer that question. So, as you can see from all of that, let's get rid of that. As you can see from all of that, liberty is a complex and multifaceted concept, encompassing both the absence of interference and the presence of opportunities. And by examining its nuances, we can hopefully better navigate contemporary debates about rights and policies and governance. So that's it for our discussion on liberty. In the next video, we're going to think about democracy. We're going to examine its principles, its challenges, and its philosophical foundation. So I look forward to seeing you there. But as you have got this far, I do have a request, and that is, would you mind awfully liking the video, subscribing to the channel and all that good stuff. Obviously this greatly helps me. The more people see these videos, the better. But more importantly, and this is the bit that you should care about, because whether it helps me or not is largely irrelevant to you, but the bit that you should care about is that when you subscribe to the channel and you like the video and you comment and you engage and all of that good stuff, what you are doing is sending YouTube a signal. You're telling YouTube, not only am I interested in this person and what he's got to say, I'm interested in the things that are being discussed. So YouTube will start showing you more content from not just me, but from other creators talking about these things too, which is wonderful, because that means that you can view this information through all the different sort of lenses of, like, you know, the perception filters of the individual. You can be sort of not too pinned down by any one particular interpretation, and you can assess the information far more critically, and you can come to your own conclusions, and then it can be useful in your life. So there's definitely some benefit to you for liking the video and subscribing to the channel and all that good stuff. However, there's totally no pressure. Thank you for your time. I genuinely do really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Goodbye.